Behind you, there is a key. It will operate the bridge to the Jalud station. Press the button to get inside. The Jalud will take you to Neyyah. In the name of Fazalta, your existence changes everything. Go to Neyyah. Save us all, like the Pelska foretold.
Before we proceed, I do kind of want the takeaway of this video just to be like, holy shit, somebody made a Riven fan game and it looks like this. Like, this is an insane accomplishment and it's really cool to see. And it's why I jumped on the game so quickly. The moment I saw it existed was like, what? Look at this. This is absurd. And everyone, and anyone that worked on it should be commended for this insane accomplishment. But this is me, as always, being very critical of everything all the time. There are people who will be satisfied with this game purely because it did what it did at all. But I think that this game, unfortunately, Neyyah, sorry, probably won't really have the legs of the game that it is emulating here. And that's the struggle I'm having, is that I feel like Neyyah, in trying to recreate Riven and Mist and whatnot, is essentially accomplishes becoming what people who don't like Mist think Mist is. I really hit a breaking point here, where I was reading this journal, and it's like, okay, we've got these like long-winded journals, long page numbers, difficult to read handwriting font, and so on. Very Mist here, but I hit this sentence right here, and it's this long. The sentence is a full page long. Kuan had offered much in the ways of relaxing walks and forest hikes in the days that I had decided to escort her from Vohani Citadel. But when I received this news at a gathering later that day, all the smells of the bulboba trees I had passed, and the sounds of the Talabrook birds nesting comfortably on rocky outcrop I had ventured out to, overlooking the Bahar Sea, were torn out. See, I don't even know how to read it out loud, acting-wise. Were torn out of me by the swipe of Dread's blade, weighing into my heart, turning my blood cold. That's an insane sentence. It's just an insane sentence to write, in general. But, like, what they're trying to say is, I am on this beach, and no, it's a beach or forest? I don't even internalize what it's saying, even though I've read it multiple times, because it's like a struggle. Like, these walks are normally relaxing to me, but today it could not fend off the dread of what it was to come. Is like an elegant, quicker way of vaguely saying that. But they feel the need to have 17 parathodical thoughts where they're like, oh, the bulboba trees and the Talabrook birds and the ba-da-ba-da-ba. But it's like, ooh. You can convey this exact thought, but in a different number of sentences, in a different order, and you can get it across. You don't need to name drop every single element, every single, like, proper noun surrounding you, necessarily, but you can be like, as I escorted her to this scary ritual, this walk that would normally bring me comfort, I found no joy in, or whatever. But, like, this is like an unreadable sentence, and it's kind of full of stuff like that, unfortunately. Like, the writing can be rough in general, to the point where I just kind of felt the need to, like, reconsider what these games are like. So we have journals in this game, and particularly a pretty famous part of a lot of the Mist games is that you read a big journal at some point. Often, maybe even multiple journals, but oftentimes in particular, you get a journal from Atris at some point that you read for a while. It's often available near the beginning of the game or even immediately. Like in Mist 3, I think it's just in your bag, and you just realize it's there and open it at some point, and you can just sit there and read for like half an hour. It is a solid chunk of text, but it sets up the setting and what's going on and what your character motivation is, and it's there for you to refer to anytime you want to. This game has journals too, but I feel slightly insane reading it a lot of the time. So it's like, although I have salvaged the paletish head statues from the pillars, was it right for me to agree to having the only remaining Chianti building demolished just for the sake of experiments? Decent sentence. Too many names already, but it's like, okay, I salvaged this relic but is it okay what we're doing here? Am I doing something bad? There's an emotional context to this first sentence, at least. So you're like, okay, sure. They're worried about their colonialist impact on this past culture in a way that is very Myst, because the Myst series is almost exclusively about colonialism, and not everyone talks about that. I was working on a script about it, but we'll see if I ever actually make it. The Flitsu plants are vital in my plan to eradicate Smolex's obsession and pollution of the Paita technology. This is getting challenging. So, based on this sentence, you would think Flitsu plants were a thing that were established in the previous sentence, but none of the words we read last sentence were Flitsu plants. So we're not continuing a thought about Flitsu plants. We just brought up Flitsu plants out of nowhere, seemingly because, but we're having to do a lot of work here, maybe the act of demolishing the Chianti building for experiments is somehow leading to getting whatever a Flitsu plant is, which is somehow needed to eradicate Smolex, who apparently is attacking Paita technology. We don't know what Paita technology is. We don't know who Smolax is. And if you're reading this sentence in real time, because I normally don't stop and break down every sentence like this when I'm reading, I understand it even less. It's just, I got hit in 2 sentences by I think 6 different unique names I've never heard of before, of which are not repeated and are not explicitly connected to each other. This natural power could be a way to save Oluge, another one, before it's too late. Perhaps the creepers will come after me next. Creepers? Okay. Unknown if that's a creature, or if it's like creeper vines, or I might end up feeling them wrapping around my ankles somewhere on a beach, hating me as much as they hate that wretched redelium metal. Another unique... see, this is becoming a problem. Quickly in impenetrable text. A thing about Myst is that people they joke about it endlessly. The meme is that Myst is incomprehensible. That is overblown. If you play Myst right now, not only can you play it, you can probably beat it in a single sitting if you have all afternoon to yourself. Myst is like a 4-hour puzzle game. It's 2 portals long. Myst is not very long. I beat it very quickly on my first attempt. But the difference somewhat is that we have now played a bunch of puzzle games inspired by Myst, and also inspired by the games inspired by Myst, and also just unrelated puzzle games, and also video games. We have a better grammar for how to play video games. The struggle with Myst is that it was the most popular video game ever made when it came out. No joking. Myst was the most popular video game ever made when it came out. And so it had a huge audience, but it was an audience for among people that had never played video games before. But also, video games had barely existed so far. So a game that looks like this, but also much worse because it was pixelated and small and tiny graphics, having to interact with a game that plays like this, genuinely baffling. It's just like how I could when I was a younger guy, when I was 10 or 12 or something, I played Diablo 2, and it was just a game where you click on things and they explode like piñatas. And I thought that's what top-down RPGs were like. The first time I played a CRPG, I was like, I don't understand. I tried the Temple of Elemental Evil, and I tried Fallout 1 or 2 or something, and I'm like, I don't understand. How do you play this game? Because I only knew Diablo 2. If people had never interacted with something like this, they just didn't know how to do it. So there's so many barriers of you playing the game at all. It's like giving a controller to your dad when you're playing a first-person shooter and him not being able to figure out how to walk around. That's what was happening when people had to try to solve puzzles in Myst. So the puzzles are actually really cleverly laid out in Myst and surprisingly intuitive, in part because the puzzle solving in Myst is all about you figuring out what the surrounding environment means, which is a lived-in environment that actual people lived in the setting, and then solving the puzzle generally involves just having to figure out how to use the environment the way the people that lived there use the environment. It's a really cool way of doing puzzles, and most of the Myst franchise is pretty committed to doing that, even the ones made by other people after Cyan, because the third game is made by Presto Studios, and the fourth game is made by Ubisoft, which is weird. That's the whole trajectory of those games, But yeah, they have this big journal in those games, and intuitively you'd be like, oh, yeah, those were boring too, right? Because Myst is a boring game, and people don't and it's complicated, and I'd say, it's too complicated for me. Shut up. fuck you. That's anti-intellectualism. You need to step it up and play things and actually challenge yourself and give it a go. I came on a little aggressive, but you know what I mean. I'm doing a YouTube video where you're hyperbolic for a bit. But people, there's nothing more annoying than people engaging with media and being like, no, I'm just a small bean. I'm just a small bean. I can't do this. It's like, no, it's a consumer electronics game that was the most popular video game in the world. You can play it. It's not that hard. Literally, it was a game that grandmas were playing. So it's like, it's just not actually that deep. The memes about Myst being too hard to play are just kind of nonsense, and it's kind of the creeping... anti-intellectualism is the word, like for people like being unwilling to engage with something that even sounds slightly challenging, which is leading to people not engaging with much of anything besides like Marvel movies and whatnot. But we're getting off topic. So I went back because I needed to center myself, because I read that journal entry and I was like, what is happening? I'm scared. And these go on and on and on. The Portal Tank, the Felzatians, Rondanda Temple, Kula Crystal, Zalume Tuktop, the Zalume Tuktop Chamber Shutter, the Paida Factory, Crystal Lamps, it's Philitsu Dome, Philitsu Root, the Rotary Shell. Bro, this is page 3 and 4 of the entire game's journals. You need to chill. Maybe Orion. I don't know. Who's Orion? So let's go Urntnur. These are so many names and places that this is literally unreadable. To the point where I would actually recommend a rewrite of this stuff, in particular because it is thankfully just text. It's not even handwritten text, it's text in a font. It's harder to rewrite cutscenes because they've been recorded with live action actors, but a lot of this stuff could be rewritten to really help the onboarding of people. And I want to compare this to, I went back and checked out the remake of Riven, which I think this actually might be the original text of Riven, but one way or another, it's actually like a really strong introduction. This is the sequel to Myst, but it's the game that this game is most directly implementing because it's a big interconnected series of islands with different transit systems in the ocean, whereas Myst was a single tiny island with portal books that took you to completely different planets, basically, that have different, like because it was, you know, Riven's one location, Neyyah is kind of one location. So this is how the first journal you open up reads. It's Atris's journal. They held for more than 30 years, but the corrections I made to Riven have finally failed. The island has resumed the familiar pattern of decay that is the hallmark of my father's work. I must now race to implement this new patch before it's too late. I only hope that my revised theories are sound. Clean. We only need to know Riven, which is the name of the game, and is also the place we're standing in, so we can probably figure out what that part means. So the challenge of this sentence is that they're talking about correcting books and changing books. This is admittedly the sequel to Myst, so you're probably already familiar with the idea that books contain places and whatnot. But even when you're new to this, you're like, okay, this place is in decay. Something's wrong with it. My dad did this. I have to fix this because we care about places and things and people, and that's bad. Sounds really bad. Revisions to Riven completed. There are still a number of minor adjustments that need to be made, but the basic corrections are in and should be working. Clinical, efficient writing, written by somebody that is doing a journal for their own future reference or just jotting down their thoughts. They're not saying like, the sea salt stung on my eyes as I walked upon the sandy beach. No, there's no one, you don't do a purple prose in a journal that you're writing. It's a journal. You're writing your thoughts and that are relevant to the thing that you're focused on. It's actually really a great way of getting to what a character cares about, because they're going to only write about that bit. Something's not right. I've been monitoring the instruments for several hours now, but I've thus far observed no change. It's possible I've made an error, though I've checked my entry against my pre-notation and can find no discrepancy. I haven't slept in nearly 3 days, so it may be just that I'm just not seeing it. If the fault is with my foundational assumption, so it is like this is how he writes, this is how he is, this is Atris's way of of talking. So it is like, it's dry, it's not exciting, it's not overly descriptive, but it is really clear. And as you're getting sucked into it, you're like, okay, something's up. We're getting told a story, and there's a progression here. However, perhaps after a short rest, I will see something. Success. It appears that my repairs have been effective after all. The gateway image has become noticeably clearer, and although it's impossible to know this with absolute certainty, the island seems to have quieted itself. Just a few more weeks of work, and I should be free. At last, to go there myself and attempt to bring Catherine back. Stakes. Okay, he can't reach this location, and someone named Catherine, which we know from the last game is his wife, but even if you don't know that yet, Catherine's in there. How do we get Catherine out? The past 8 months have left me little time to devise a strategy for getting her out of there. There's been no sign from her in all that time. I only hope that... No, I must assume she's all right. At least my fears undermine my efforts. Like, he's choking down his doubts, and he's, like, committing to having to do this difficult work in isolation that his father inflicted upon him that has endangered Catherine. And it's like, that's an intro to a story. You know what's going on, and it's also an interesting look into a character that you don't interact with directly in the actual game, basically, but has motivated the whole story because he sent you here. I think you technically might interact with him briefly in the beginning of the game for like 2 seconds. I don't mean like, I mean he's not here, so like it lets his story follow you, and this goes for all the rise and fall of like his efforts to save Riven, the degrading situation, his attempts to like craft strategies to be able to deal with this problem. You compare this to this thing, and it's like, Neyyah knows Smollex can smile for now, knowing he has written more of this once beautiful world from another slice of its history, but not for long. See, there's a sentence that's comprehensible because it's the setting, Neyyah, and then Smollex, which I guess is the villain with a funny name, but he came up earlier, so we know that's the villain. I've made some space in an old storage area in the back of a secret office at the Paita factory, taking away some of the pallets that were once used for storing crates of freshly powered Paitas and placing statue heads there. I didn't have the heart to dump them to the bottom of the ocean. Everything else in this once beautiful world is crumbling into the ocean as it is. Maybe Orion will release her vines on Flitsu Dome now, knowing I am trying all I can to preserve what is left of the Fazaltian world here on Neyyah. We have some motivation, this obsession with this past world. I will say that I didn't comprehend most of this the first time I read it, because I was like stuck in so many given away terms. I did smile at the little present my friend Ertnur sent over the other day, a prototype of what would later become the Flitsu Dome itself, demonstrating the mechanics and operations of the rotary system. I think it will serve as a nice ornament in my office on the Paita factory. Workers progressed nicely on the Lavandis crystal lamps. With the alterations made to one specific lamp, perhaps the prototype model will come in useful for making sure certain things are kept safe. The Flitsu Roots experiment are important. I must protect them. Just another sentence. About what? What are we talking about? The biggest concern I have is the longevity of the Flitsu Dome's operation. Smollex was quick to examine the mechanism of the Fletzian gun towers. There's gun towers now. How all cogs should run together in order for the towers to rise and the Zaloom Took top chamber shutter to lower. He simply stole what he needed from the Fazaltians and did not require much assistance from the magicians at the Redania Temple at all. There's magicians at the Ronalda Temple. Apart from the installation of the giant Kula crystal at the top of the dome and the Flitsu plant pools inside, the rotary shell works fine. Concerning the designs and operations, I get unmoored immediately. I'm like, what are we saying? What are we talking about? And like, I, to be clear, am now like, maybe like halfway through the game. So looking back on this text, I am learning what more of these words mean. And so it's starting to make a little bit more sense. But it's not fun to read. It doesn't give you a clean through line of what your motivation is or what's going on. You can't really tell if these sentences, like Paita Factory, Crystal Lamps, Flitsu Roots, Flitsu Dome, Fazaltian Gun Towers, you can't really tell if these thoughts are related or if there's just a bullet list of random sentences, because you don't really know what the relationship between all these buildings are. You don't know how the world is laid out, what the islands are called, what each chunk of the island that is both called and what it does, to an extent to be able to interpret how they relate to each other. And so like it's just you're missing that clean through line. And like in Riven, Atris and Gen are two competing book boys. They're both learned characters that are trying to iterate on some kind of abstract science that we as the audience don't fully understand and never will, which is the art, the way of writing the Mist books. But the books the journals we read from both those characters are very carefully written so that we can largely tell what they're saying, even though they're talking about a bunch of sci-fi nonsense that we will frankly never understand even by the end of the game. Because we never actually write in the art in these games, because technology would never allow us to make our own settings from scratch. That's just called writing. It's the most complex thing in the world that no video game can ever let you do, but you can just do the art. Performing the art is called writing a novel. Just write. So that's a funny dynamic, what's going on with the text of Myst, technically. But like, you go through the stuff and I'm like, I don't know. And now that I've gone through the game, I'm like, okay, with the alterations made to one specific lamp, this is an incomprehensible sentence, but I now know, having already solved the puzzle, there is one specific lamp that has a secret button in it. This is a hint at a puzzle somewhere in the game. But with the alterations made to one specific lamp, perhaps the prototype model will come in useful for making sure certain things are kept safe. It's like, not particularly related to the other thoughts, but it's also like him trying to be overly coy about a secret that he's trying to keep, but he's writing it in a journal. It's supposed to be a secret, but he's writing it in his journal, but he's being slightly coy about it. But he's being ineffectively secretive because he's talking about it in his journal. In fact, he keeps talking about like his secret hideout in his book, and there's an entire paper trail pointing to his secret hideout, which makes the word secret increasingly funny. It's odd. I'm losing my thread a little bit because as I ramble on, but I'm just like, you get what I mean. Like this is not what you want to, and like we're already doing like activation codes. Like it's trying to do the double duty of info dumping about your world and trying to do world building as much as possible, but brute forcing it in as fast as possible, while also doing puzzle hints and clues about what to do for the player, while also trying to do the third job, which is arguably the most important job, of communicating the emotional stakes of the story. Whereas over here in Riven, it's just all emotional stakes. It's about, like, in some of these journals, they drop hints about some things about the setting and things you need to know. But the core of Myst and Riven is about the player learning to understand what is happening in the world around them, and then using that emotional and story context to explore in a more intuitive sense with their eyes and hands to figure out what things are going. Every time you get into a new room in Riven, you quickly put together like, oh, this is Gen's weird little chamber where he pretended to be a god and would get gifts given to him by the locals as he tried to control them with fear and technology and so on. And there's a secret door here which he would sneak in to then come and get the tributes that were given to him and so on. Going into rooms intuitively being able to figure out what they did and what their jobs were was like a lot of what you were supposed to be doing there. And you did that in the locations themselves, not in the journal you're given at the beginning of the game, for example. And so if you make the text try to accomplish every job at once almost equally, being world building and character motivation and puzzle hints all at once, and you do that so bluntly and loudly, it kind of becomes this incomprehensible text that keeps bouncing between different topics and doesn't really have a clear emotional focus or goal, and it gets really hard to read. In particular, what I want to say about this journal we started on is that it's weird that he's writing such a long, messy sentence that doesn't accomplish its goal. It's even weirder that this is a journal that's written like a fiction novel. Like it's written with like a bunch of descriptions and adjectives and like asides about the past of the location, but not like the way a person would talk. It's like how a fiction writer would write. And it's like, why is somebody's personal journal, as you can see up here, written like that? I had passed the sounds of the Talabrook birds nesting comfortably on rocky outcrops I had ventured out to, overlooking the paralyzed sea, were torn out of me at the swipe of Dread's blade. Like, and then it gets even weirder when you realize over the course of this journal, this character is kind of a Luddite. Like, he's the old-timey warrior character whose life is entirely informed by being a guy who has to defend this home and maintain the walls and the guns and fight to the death day in and day out, and always being vigilant for that stuff. Why does he talk with purple prose and write like a fiction novel when he's doing his own thoughts? So it's its own weird characterization that his thoughts are like that. Like, not even Atrus's thoughts were like this. Like, Atrus spoke very clearly in a very clinical way because he's writing what are functionally like scientific journals to keep up with what he's been up to, so he can refer back to what he's done recently and and keep all of these balls in the air of like his goals, because he needs to be able to like figure out how to save Riven essentially. And being Atris, this having been a long-term goal that's been happening for a while, the Riven situation. We're so many pages into this book and it starts there when we start reading it. He has multiple journals in parallel about multiple things he's working on, so he has to be able to like juggle between these things and tell what's happening. And so it's about clearly communicating. What gets really weird about this journal in particular is that as time goes on, it becomes a crisis and they're under attack, and he writes that down. And in this setting, we saw that the people in the setting, they write using like an inkwell and a quill. Like, he has to take his journal, which he carries everywhere apparently, set it down on a table, get a quill or a pen, equivalent of a quill, you know, dab that in an inkwell in the middle of this crisis situation, and then carefully pen this on the journal, and then like allow it to dry before he turns the page, because the ink has to dry. Like, what? Why is this warrior carrying a journal around? Why isn't it in his bedroom or something at home? Like, why is he carries it around and writes emergency messages in it on the fly with his ink quill? And then he like he resigns himself to like fight to the death. And it's his final, so it ends up containing his final words right before he dies. And you're like, that, it's one thing if you're like, I know what I must do on the morrow. Like, tomorrow I'm going to have to do something very difficult, and my thoughts are out there for my adoptive daughter. I'm sorry to leave you like this, Belalka, but it's not like that. It's like, shit's fucked right now, I gotta go. But he's writing a whole page of ink quill writing in a journal about how shit's fucked right now. And then he dies. And I'm like, you're writing in the style of a BioShock audio log, where people are like experiencing rapture, getting splicered to death, and bad things happening in real time when they happen to be recording an audio log, which is a funny contrivance in BioShock sometimes. But the fact that everyone is just vlogging all the time in that setting, you know, not that unbelievable given that we do it here. People just really like to do audio logs in that setting. But like, at the very least, the contrivance of an audio log allows you to be recording your thoughts in real time and just spewing them out. And then you also get to speak in your character voice, and it all comes through like that. You get to act, and that's a fun part of that setting that is justified by the setting. This setting is using the journals from Myst, which were originally meant to be personal notes, and they're using it to write fiction novels, but in first person, diegetic fiction novels. They're written by the person that the story is about. So that characterizes the person as somebody who would write like that and choose to write in times like this. But also the logistics of the setting don't really justify the text existing in the first place half the time. And while all this is happening, you're also strangely blindsided by the fact that this text is voice acted. you get like 10 hours in this game, there's no voice acting at any point besides the live action characters you encounter that talk to you directly. You open this journal and it starts talking. It's fully voiced, and it's the only one I've seen so far, which was fascinating. But yeah, I just been on a big ramble about this. I need to make more videos like this probably, because I need to lower the threshold for creating on this channel, because the whole point is for me to just like dump thoughts onto this whenever I feel like it. And so I want to talk about Neyyah for a bit. Still, the takeaway is still, just so we're clear, there's a fucking fan Riven game that looks like this. You should probably check it out. I'll put a link to the description. And you can come to your own conclusions about what you think of the rest of the game's quality and stuff like that. I just personally think that the writing is tough. In particular because I talked about how Riven works and how it's all about understanding your surroundings. If the journals are not super clear and comprehensible, and not to say that they have to tell you everything up front, there can be stuff that gains meaning over time, obviously. Because we're like it's like an in media res style of storytelling, the way that Myst and Riven goes. They just start. And so the journals are your attempt to pick up the pieces of like what the fuck's going on in a setting that you don't fully understand while you're going. And so it's meant to be referred to periodically as you go and so on. But if you're reading these things and they're A, not fun to read, and B, difficult to glean meaning from while you're reading them, then that's going to impact your ability to understand any of your surroundings. So what I'm finding is in this game is that my ability to understand where I am and what I'm doing is greatly impacted, which might be why the game feels the need to have... That's the wrong menu. That might be the reason why the game has so many desires to, like, have a literal quest log and give you objectives and sort of handhold you. In fact, it has 3 difficulties that all are just how much it tells you. And I'm playing on the hardest mode, which is the one that seemingly is how Myst and Riven worked originally. So I'm playing without whatever tutorials exist. So people might not notice this because if they play on the easy difficulty, it might just continually tell them what to do. But that would also, I think, be a misunderstanding of what the games are that are being emulated in the first place. I feel like a lot of the players are going to pick what is the quote-unquote hard mode because they want to figure out what's going on by just reading journals and fiddling with levers and being like, oh, I get it, because that's what they enjoyed about the games that this is emulating. So if the journals and the writing don't accomplish that on a base level, then the entire game is kind of not successfully emulating what it's going for. So on the offhand chance that the indie dev is watching this, I would love to see just a close critical look at the writings of the first 2 Myst games, what they accomplish, how they accomplish them, and maybe consider how a revision to these journals might help the entire game succeed in general, but also just make it very satisfying to interact with and read on that level. This is my long-ass ramble. I've been going for too long. I've got shit to do today. I'll see you guys later.